Pinpoint Weather University. Sponsored by Gaston Roofing.
Happy Wednesday to you. We're halfway through the week, and that means we've got a new edition of Pinpoint Weather University here on Queen City News Plus. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson, going to be your host for this episode. And I will say, it's been a really heartbreaking week meteorologically speaking. We've had catastrophic floods across the U.S., and it has been really rough. Some of the scenes that we've seen out of central Texas, central North Carolina, and just last night, Tuesday, July 8th, we had another catastrophic flood in New Mexico, in Ruidoso. We'll talk about all these floods, and I'm also going to talk about why the Texas flood happened. There's been a lot of blame thrown around of what caused the Texas flood, and really, it's just Mother Nature we should be blaming. I'll discuss just what caused this flood and the meteorological setup for it. We'll also talk about cloud seeding today, what that means, and why it was not to blame for the Texas floods. We'll also be talking with Shel Winkley, who's a meteorologist with Climate Central. He'll be talking to us about how a warmer world could lead to more of these extensive rainfall events. And we'll be discussing that with him and talking about some of their research with nonprofit group Climate Central here shortly in the next segment. First, I do want to talk about the very heartbreaking situation in Central Texas. Here's video from the scenes there in Central Texas. Right now, as of recording this Wednesday morning, July 9th, 173 people have lost their lives, and there's still another 110 missing. You see the shoe there just sitting there in the rubble, the trees, debris just being washed up. In ways, this reminds us of what we saw last year in late September with Hurricane Helene in Western Carolinas. It is just a heartbreaking and just sad situation. You see just members there officials continuing to search for any signs of life, helicopters in the sky, and just law enforcement everywhere trying to find over 100 people that are still missing today. It's just heartbreaking. It's sad when you see scenes like things just floating down rivers and family members on the phone. It's just hard. It's really hard to see this. And unfortunately, this is becoming more common in our country. And just think, we've seen 3 floods very similar to this in just a week, less than a week. I want to talk about what happened in central North Carolina. We had Tropical Cyclone Chantal, which honestly, Tropical Cyclone Chantal wasn't a very strong storm. We actually use a meteorological term for this. We call it rain with a name because it wasn't a strong tropical system, wasn't well organized, but it had a lot of moisture with it. So here's some of the scenes from that. I was just popping that up full screen for you. You can see this in central North Carolina. There were rescue operations that were done to save people there over the weekend, over the holiday weekend. Very scary scenes there. 4 people have lost their lives because of the central North Carolina floods. So another flood with the death toll, obviously not as worse as Texas, but any loss of life during a weather event is horrifying, and it's sad. It's heartbreaking to think about. So that is the scenes from North Carolina. I also want to talk about the flood from last night, Tuesday, July 8th. This is in Ruidoso, New Mexico. So this is an area that actually saw a big wildfire just last year, left a big burn scar over that region. It's a mountainous area. Whenever you have a burn scar, you're going to have more floods in that area because you've got a lot of eroded ground. The rain hits the ground hard. It can't saturate into the soil well, and it just runs off. And this is, again, Ruidoso, New Mexico. Very nice area, but unfortunately, I've been seeing a lot of flooding lately because of those burn scars, and 3 people lost their lives in this situation. You can see this house literally just floating down bodies of water there, just tearing down trees as it goes down the water. So this is just, again, sad scenes. We've been seeing this more often. And I do want to talk about why the Texas floods happened. There's been a lot of blame. Unfortunately, I think we're blaming the wrong thing. I think we need to just be blaming Mother Nature for this because this was a really rough meteorological setup. Let's go ahead and talk about how this happened. So here's a look at Tropical Storm Barry, which actually formed not last weekend, but the weekend before. It formed in the Gulf. It only lasted for probably about a day, if that. But it made landfall in Mexico. And once it made landfall in Mexico there, it hit the mountains there. So once it hit the mountains, very mountainous terrain there in Mexico, that tropical moisture can't really go anywhere. So it hits the Sierra Madre Mountains. It can't go over the mountains, can't go through the mountains. So what that moisture did is that low-level moisture slid north into southern and central Texas. Now, as that low-level moisture streams north into Texas, there was another local area of low pressure. We call it a mesoscale convective system, an MCV, or mesoscale convective vortex, I should say. That's an MCV, and short for meteorology terms. And that moisture interacts with that slow-moving low-pressure system, and it creates numerous slow-moving storms because, again, that system's not moving. And that led to a lot of heavy rain there, right over central Texas, right over Kerr County. Again, most of those deaths that have happened from this flood, 173 people dead, most of them coming out of Kerr County, Texas, the hill country of Texas, where you've got all that rain coming down, and that rain just doesn't really have a lot of areas to go to. It just flows down into the mountainous terrain there. And unfortunately, that leads to that just significant flooding, the significant rise of the Guadalupe River there, reaching record levels of rising. It crested at 37 feet at Hunt, and it also 22 feet is considered major flood stage. So it was 15 feet above major flood stage. I want to talk about now the warnings. There are a lot of concerns about some of the warnings for the National Weather Service where they short that night. They actually had 5 people on staff that night talking or alerting folks about these floods. So let's talk about the timing of the weather alerts. So Kerr County, Texas, the flood watch was issued at 1:18 in the afternoon on Thursday. Now, this is about 12 hours before the flood actually occurred. We saw the National Weather Service meteorologists, they saw the setup, they saw how significant this could possibly be. Flood watch was issued for that area. At 6:10 later that evening, the Weather Prediction Center put out a special discussion saying there's going to be really high rainfall rates in this area, could see a lot of rain stacking up in certain spots and leading to flash flooding. So that's just kind of alerting a lot of meteorologists that there's a chance there could be some significant flooding there. Then at 1:06 in the morning, when the flood was starting to happen, a flash flood warning was issued with a considerable tag on the flash flood warning, meaning it would go right to your phone through the WEA system. So it's that bump, 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 that alert you get on your phone. That happened at 1:06 in the morning on Friday when the flood happened. Flash flooding was happening. Flash flood warning issued for Kerr County. At 4:03, about three hours later, a flash flood emergency was issued. That means that this flooding is extremely life-threatening. If you don't get out of the way, this flood could kill you. It is a significant situation, and that's what the flash flood emergency was issued for. And then at 4:20 in the morning that Friday, the Guadalupe River reached major flood stage. And again, it had a major rise after that. So that is kind of the timing of the weather alerts. The alerts are there. The big question that a lot of officials are asking, and we all were kind of asking, how well could those alerts get to the folks that are down the campground with some of the signal issues in that area? So that's something that'll obviously be, I think, looked at here if there's a better way to get those alerts to folks that are on the campground. But again, just for awareness, if you ever have a flood watch issued for your area, I would not be on a campground. I wouldn't be near bodies of water because that means that flooding is possible in those locations. So let's talk about cloud seeding now. Cloud seeding has been another thing that has gotten the blame. And I want to talk about this quickly because we've got Shel Winkler who's going to be joining us here in the next segment. We're going to talk with him about how warming Earth is leading to more of these extensive rainfall events. So this is a cloud I took from Monday. It's full of cloud droplets. We're just looking at a bunch of water droplets and ice crystals in the sky. It's giving us that visual illusion of a cloud. So we actually have a lot of dust in the atmosphere. We've got smoke particles, some wildfire smoke, volcanic eruptions. We've got air pollution in the air. If we didn't have any air pollution at all, we would never have clouds and we'd never have rain. The big reason why is we warm the ground, the warm air particles rise here, and once the warm air particles rise, the water vapor, it cools and it collides with those tiny particles in the atmosphere, particles like dust, and could be pollen that creates that, or, smoke, different things like that. And the cloud droplet forms when it forms enough water vapor, or enough water vapor condenses around what we call condensation nuclei, those dust particles, those little particles in the sky. If you get enough water droplets to form around those, you can get your cloud droplets to form, and that's essentially what happens. The water vapor forms around those condensation nuclei, and we get our water droplets. Eventually, they get big enough to fall out of the cloud, and you get your rain. So cloud seeding, it's you don't even use anything that crazy. We're essentially just putting more of those particles in the sky to create more chances of rain. And dry ice, salt, even table salt can be used for this, but silver iodide is the most common agent used. And we have to have clouds already present. You have to have thunderstorm clouds or tall, big cumulus clouds already there in order to cloud seed. And this isn't anything new. It's been done since the 1940s. And a matter of fact, from 1967 to 1972 in the Vietnam War, it was used to rain out enemies, the North Vietnamese army. It was used in China to actually keep rain away from events. So overall, it's been used for things that aren't necessarily terrible stuff. It's been used to help. It's also used in Central Texas. It did not cause these floods because they cloud seeded 2 days before the floods actually happened. It's impossible to even drop that much rain with cloud seeding, and you wouldn't have a cloud stay on the air for 2 days. But it's used in Central Texas to kind of help feed some of those drier areas, and also out west to help feed some of the drier areas with water. So you need the right cloud. What ends up happening, we go inside the cloud, you've got supercooled water droplets. Those supercooled water droplets are essentially below the freezing mark, but they're not frozen. They're still in their liquid phase. So let's bring the plane through. The plane comes through. You can shoot the silver iodide in the sky. You get the silver iodide. It's in the cloud, and the water droplets, they coalesce to those silver iodide particles that have been put in the cloud, and that creates ice or snowflakes to form. This process repeats itself, and eventually the ice and the snowflakes get heavy enough to where they fall out of the cloud, and you get your precipitation. So that's how cloud seeding happens. Again, cloud seeding, you seed a cloud, it might rain for about 30 minutes or so. It only creates about 5 to 15% more rain for us. It's not a major increase. So again, that did not cause the Texas floods there. It's a catastrophic situation. We've seen more of these historic floods. Coming up on the other side of the break, we're going to be speaking with Shel Winkley, meteorologist with Climate Central, and we're going to be discussing some of the research they're doing to show where a warmer world could be leading to not just more water vapor, but some more of these heavier rainfall events. We'll be right back after this short break, my friends. Please stay with us. Welcome back into Pinpoint Weather University. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson. I've got a special guest with me for this next segment. His name's meteorologist Shel Winkley. I want to go ahead and bring him into the show here. He is a meteorologist with nonprofit group Climate Central. Shel, we've talked a lot offline together, my friend, and it feels good to have you join the show with us today. I know you guys do a lot of studying on several different things, but in this particular episode, we're going to talk more about some of the catastrophic floods we've seen here recently. 3 historic floods in less than a week, and we are seeing, it feels like these floods more often, these historic catastrophic floods are happening not only more often, but they're looking to be more extensive here at times too. And Shel, you guys have obviously been doing a lot with the Central Texas flood so far, researching different things. From your all's research so far, I know it's been kind of a short time since this actually happened. What have you guys seen as some of the main contributors to the flood in Central Texas?
Yeah. Hey, one, appreciate you having us. Two, I have been based in the state of Texas. I was a meteorologist and still am a meteorologist in the state of Texas for 20 years, right? So you know the topography, you know how these rain events can come together. Like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of weather pieces that go into this. So a lot of people have been asking, were these floods created by climate change specifically? And the answer to that is no. But what we do know is that climate change takes what would have been a flood event and a heavy rain event anyway over this area that is susceptible to flooding, even in, much lower rainfall totals than what we saw over the holiday weekend. But what climate change is doing is essentially boosting these events. They're making them more intense, and they're making them more likely. So a couple ways we know that, just, from basic physics, is what's called the Clausius-Clapeyron equation, which, you don't need to remember the name, but what you need to remember is that a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture. I say it's a greedier atmosphere, right? So if it can hold more moisture, then once the right weather setup comes, be it a weather system, a tropical system, a stalled system, and taps into that moisture, then it takes what would have been a natural rain event and it turns it a bit unnatural. Again, think of it like a bigger sponge just squeezing a little extra moisture out of the atmosphere.
And I like to talk about the Clausius-Clapeyron relationship a lot because it really helps you understand that. I have that graphic up there just kind of talking about the Clausius-Clapeyron relationship. And I like to mention this too, just that 20-degree Fahrenheit warm up can lead to 2 times more moisture in the atmosphere. And we'll see that, a lot when it comes down to hotter, more humid days. We see more moisture. We can see it take place during the summer. Obviously, during the summer, we're having more heavier rainfall events than what we see during the winter when it's a lot warmer. And something else you were mentioning, Shelly, I liked how you talked about the climate change isn't exactly always to blame for these events, but you were talking about how we are seeing more moisture in the air. What can you tell us about Austin and San Antonio, these spots in general? How much more heavier rain have we been seeing here recently over the last several years?
Yeah, so part of the story is also how fast the rain came down, right? It's not only just the level, but the just sheer amount of rainfall that came out of the sky all at once. And what we generally know about this part of Texas, what is known as Flash Flood Alley, is that while the rain events are becoming fewer and far between, you've probably seen in the news a couple times that this is an area, at least in Kerr County, where they were under some of the worst drought conditions possible. But when it actually is raining, the rain is getting heavier. So what you're looking at here is rainfall intensity over the last 50 to 55 years. And for the city of Austin, who also experienced a big flood event just the next day to the north and northwest of the city, we know that rainfall intensity has increased by 19%. It may not sound like a lot, Brandon, but what it means is that when it's raining, these aren't just your typical showers or passing thunderstorms anymore, right? This is leading to things like street flooding and flash flooding, and unfortunately, events like what we saw in the Texas Hill Country. If you want to speak specifically to that Kerr County flood, San Antonio, we can do the same thing with the data. Looking at it since 1970, we know that their rainfall intensity has increased by 6%. Again, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when it is raining in these portions of Texas, and it's not just specific to Texas, but when it's raining in these portions of Texas, we know that those rainfall events are getting heavier and have a higher likelihood of bringing flash flooding.
And obviously, these flooding events, they're very heartbreaking because we're seeing a lot of loss of life, a lot of, especially in Texas. As of recording this Wednesday morning, July 9th, over 170 people have lost their lives. 30 of those are believed to be children. It's heartbreaking. And there's also the money aspect of this as well, the economic impact that Texas is going to be faced with this. So with some of your research, you guys have been looking also into just what the dollars could look like in the future for Texas if more flooding events like this continue.
Right. Yeah. This is just inland flooding is one of those things. Like freshwater flooding really does cause a lot of issues. And when we talk about money, I don't want to seem crass because we're also talking about the loss of life. And there's still, again, as of recording this, over 160 people missing at least. But what we know when we look at the economic impact is this is where people are camping. This is where people are setting up for a weekend to enjoy the idyllic Texas Hill Country that also sets up to become flash flood alleys. So for Kerr County, Texas, specifically where this big flood occurred near Kerrville, we know that with the warming we've seen now and with future warming on an annual basis, that could be a loss between $1 million and $10 million. So again, why this is important is because these are the houses that we're living in or that we're renting for a weekend that are potentially being impacted. So we're inside of those. And this is infrastructure, right? These are bridges. These are things that can get us away from floods when those warnings are issued that could potentially not only keep us from getting away from floods, but also hinder us being able to get in to do the rescue after we see weather events like this, because we know, again, that they're becoming more likely.
Michelle, we're running out of time for this segment, but I do want to get a short break in, and we'll come back with you here. And I just want to talk briefly just about what kind of things we can do, at least climatologically speaking, what kind of things we can do to at least slow the warming that we are seeing in our world today. Again, you've mentioned it, climate change, not necessarily the blame for everything, but if we can help slow down that warming, maybe we could help slow down some of these other major floods that we've been seeing. Let's talk on the other side of the break just about what people can do as a whole to maybe help slow that warming. We'll be right back here. We're watching Pinpoint Weather University here on Queen City News Plus. Welcome back into Pinpoint Weather University here on Queen City News Plus. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson here with Shell Winkley. I just wanted to talk briefly, Shell, before we go, about what folks can do when it comes down to our warming globe to at least slow that warming. We can't undo the damage that's already been done. You mentioned that a little bit in the last segment, but what are some things we can do to slow the warming and maybe, at least maybe, slow down some of these historic flooding events that we've been seeing lately?
Yeah, so I always like this conversation because I don't want to leave you with, all this data and maybe some bad news and you just feeling like, oh, this is a big problem. And it is a big problem, right? So I think what we know right now is like, this is what was being warned for several decades from scientists about how climate change and global warming can impact weather events. We're living that now. So the question is, do we want to hold and try to bring back to a more stable climate, or do we just keep burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, methane gas, that heat trapping pollution that's causing this warmth that is boosting these weather systems, right? So the first thing I always like to tell people, Brandon, is what we're doing right now. It's conversation and communication are a solution, right? Watch this, process it, and then maybe go outside, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your family, maybe go to a city council meeting, talk to your elected officials, and see what you can do as a community, as a street, as a neighborhood, in order to mitigate some of these things, right? We all can't afford to go out and buy an electric vehicle. We all can't afford to put solar panels on the roof, right? We know that that's where we need to go as just civilization and as humanity, is that we need to draw down the amount of coal, oil, and methane gas that we're burning. But you can still do that, right? And when we're thinking about heat, it kind of helps with the flooding aspect too. So let's try to bring those two together. If you want to bring down the heat where you live, maybe your neighborhood's just too hot, right? We know that climate change is the cause, but one way to bring down that heat is by adding more natural green space back into the mix. So natural vegetation, natural native trees, green canopy space. And what that can do is, one, cool down your neighborhood, but two, if you put that outside your house, maybe as your neighbors walking down the street, walking the dog, walking the kids to school, they go, oh, that looks really good. I want to put those in my yard. And so now you've kind of been that real life influencer, right? You've done something that has sparked an action for another person. And when we're talking about flooding, we know that native vegetation slows down those floodwaters. Trees have big power, slows down those floodwaters. So that's just a place to start. Little actions do add up. It may not seem like it, but those little actions can add up.
Yeah, I tell you what, I think as a neighbor too, it's the competition, right? As a homeowner, you see your neighbor cut their grass, you want to get out, cut your grass. Somebody grows a garden, their significant other might be like, I need you to get out there and grow the garden. So that is
tell you,
yeah.
Like again, I'm in Texas and like the summers are this summer, obviously it's been crazy rainy, but like it's been unbearable. My yard has died every year. And I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I using all this water on something that's going to die anyway? So what we did is we put in these beds with native Texas plants that are built for the heat and the drought. And you know what? Some of our other neighbors put them in too. And that's great because it's better than looking at dead vegetation, right? Brown, crispy grass. It promotes healthy ecosystems. We have more butterflies and bees flying around our yard. But again, it really helps to bring down that heat in our neighborhood and helps us to chat with our neighbors more too.
Shell Winkley, meteorologist with Climate Central, man, it's such an inspiration. I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy your research. Keep doing it. Keep getting out there, giving the folks awareness. And again, I know Texas is, it's home for you. Thinking about you guys down there. I know it's hard seeing just, not only the flood waters and the pictures, but just knowing the death toll and the people that are still missing. So definitely sending a lot of hope to Texas. Our friends in central North Carolina were thinking about you, and also in New Mexico, Ruidoso, where they're still cleaning up this morning from the floods there here on July 9th. Shell Winkley, thanks for coming on the show with us today, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And again, thanks for just having the conversation. We appreciate it.
All right, Shell, thank you so much. That's going to do it here for this edition of Pinpoint Weather University. Hope you enjoyed. I know it was a harder episode with all the historic flooding that we've seen over the last week, but we just want to continue to raise that awareness and continue to teach the public as we get more into potentially some more floods here as we go through the summer and now entering hurricane season too. So we'll continue to keep an eye on things for you, keep you safe here on the Pinpoint Weather Center here on Pinpoint University. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson here at Queen City News Plus. We'll see you next Wednesday for another episode with meteorologist Andrew Brightman We'll be talking about asteroids next Wednesday. You want to stay tuned for that next Wednesday. We'll see you there. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson. Take care, guys.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.